Well, good evening. Welcome again to Mirador Television's Roundtable with a full house tonight. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our panel ready to take on this evening whether the media is at fault for heightening the tensions that have existed between government and the populace over coronavirus, but also the atmosphere surrounding it. The statistics say, if you believe statistics, that loss in confidence in the UK media is the highest in the Western world, a drop of 27%, because they say, the critics say, they are not taking the whole thing seriously, but trying hard to score points. I should take a lesson from the American President Donald Trump. The media there is to blame for everything. So let's start off with Melissa. Is he?
Well, yes, he likes to blame the media for any of his problems. And so I think what happens is with the media is that they make an attempt to set the record straight. And then they end up getting themselves in a box where even if the president were to do something right, I mean, a broken clock is correct twice a day, it has to be negative. But oftentimes, if you really want to get the true story, you need to look at a news organization that will play it down the middle. So you look at an organization such as Reuters or such as Associated Press. They are news organizations that serve both masters, both conservative and liberal clients. So they have a tendency to have, it's imperative, having worked for the Associated Press, it is absolutely imperative that they get both sides of the story. And so the public will get both sides of the story as well.
Right. Stephen, you were like a racehorse today, ready to go out of the trap at a great rate of knots. What's your view?
Well, the big trouble is in this country that the major press owners appear to reside in offshore tax havens, and they are funded by and donors to, in one form and another, the present government. The independent press has never really succeeded in this country. It has either been left-wing, such as the dear old Daily Herald, which morphed into the Sun, which certainly isn't left anymore. Indeed, the Times used to speak with authority in the days, well, P. Murdoch. It was regarded as the thunderer, and what the Times said is what was true. I'm pleased to see it now being rather more critical of the government. But I think people are actually sick and tired of reading about Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. So they are not buying the papers. We rely, I think, much more on broadcast news. And even then, the critics of the BBC are quite vociferous. I still prefer it to the independent news. But really, this is why newspaper sales are falling. It's not just because people are not going out to the newsagents to buy a copy. They're sick and tired of reading what is in the press. So we are becoming an ill-informed nation, in my opinion.
Paul, quite by accident, I went to a pub today called the Rights of Man, which you would be familiar with. And next to me, at the next table, was a chap from Reuters. It was extraordinary, and we'd worked there at the same time. His view, having retired quite recently, is that Reuters has managed to maintain that impartiality, which others haven't. But since it's partly a financial institution as well, what's your view?
Well, the quick answer is that nobody can escape having some guilt in this. I just want to pick up on something, an axiom I read, and I've twisted a bit. Society gets the media it deserves, and the media reflects the society it inhabits. I think we should all take caution there. I believe that a population that is disinterested, which many of the populations are, allow the media to get away with certain things, the media will also champion great causes. They also back people like Murdoch and Trump. So actually, it's a multi-headed beast. So how do you, with the media, and media is not just newspapers, we're online every day. So how can the media ever be either impartial or partial? How can the media get a balance? I think it's very difficult. I'm not defending the media, but it's a damn difficult thing. You've got to sell newspapers and you've got to sell Microsoft, etc. But how do you put capitalism with doing good in society, which I think some media people would like to do. I'm sure there are. There's many journalists who, Joe McDonald, for example, a great journalist, who wants to do both, to give true, accurate statements and facts and do good. But there's few and far between. At the end of the day, it's mercenary. You've got to make money. Let's face it, as I said, I come back to this discussion. The first phone call that Trump or Putin or the Chinese premier makes is generally to somebody like Rupert Murdoch to kick off the day with, the press are actually with me or against me.
The interesting thing is that this idea of an impartial British press is a myth anyway. If you read the history of journalism, the early journalists were in Charles I's reigns, and they used to hammer pamphlets up on the wall saying, "Away with the king." Then they would run off, because if they actually got caught, off with their heads rather than his. So it is a myth. But what about you, Suzanne? Let's go back to the United States. What's your view?
I mean, I'm less concerned about impartiality, and I'm actually more concerned with people actually saying what they want to say. And I feel like in the United States, it's really a challenge to say what you really want to say, what you really want to believe. And the president is consistently challenging people if they don't think the way that he thinks. And so as a result, it's just this sort of, I don't know, it's not even really newsworthy in most cases. It's sometimes it's opinion, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's fact, sometimes it's not. I mean, everything's become sort of a less directed kind of effort to give the public information, you know? And what frustrates me is that the public isn't even fighting for a free press. I mean, I don't even think Americans even understand what it's going to be like when when every piece of news that they read actually comes from the government, because that's exactly where we're heading. And it's frightening to me. And what's even more frightening is that people don't seem to care about it.
Well, one of the things that worries me is I spent 2.5 years in Kosovo training journalists, and they got a new freedom. What they didn't realize is that freedom came with responsibility, and they felt that they could write anything, and they destroyed reputations left, right, and center. And I've got a feeling that that's happening in this country as well. But Annie, you're the average reader, if you like, and I know that you watch the news avidly. What's your view?
The media has a lot of power, and yes, should take responsibility for the things that it does and it shows. I, for one, I'm very sick and tired of the bad news that we keep on hearing. Why can't we hear about the people who have recovered from COVID-19, let's say? Unfortunately, disaster and death will always tell. Is anybody interested in the good stuff, in the positive stuff? According to the media, no one is, because all you hear is negativity.
Tell me, one of the criticisms have been that the media tries point scoring. You know, how can we damage Boris? How can we damage the health minister and so on and so forth without really having much behind them? Do you, and if I may say the general public, I know you're not speaking for them, but as a representative reaction, do you think that that's so?
Sorry, can you ask me the question again, please?
Yeah.
I lost it at Boris Johnson.
Are the press point scoring rather than being accurate in what they report?
Oh, accuracy. I don't know. Especially if politics and media go hand in hand.
Do you believe everything you read?
No, God no. Does anyone?
Well, in 3 words, you've said it all. Stephen, you heard Annie's reaction there. You particularly, I know, have a lot to do with local media, but you also keep your eye on international media, or national and international media. How's your feeling about the public's reaction?
Generally, I think that the newspapers have become very much like Facebook. With Facebook, most of the people who seem to like what I post share my views. So their liking is not newfound way of disseminating. They like it because it's what they feel. And I feel now with newspapers, people buy a paper which reflects their own view. They will not tolerate anything, dare it tell the truth, or which contradicts what they themselves feel. And that is why I believe there is such an imbalance. Somewhere we need to know the truth. And I admit everything anyone has said about Reuters really pleases me. But how often do you pick up anything from Reuters unless perhaps one can subscribe to Reuters? And I don't know how much that might cost. But that's the way to do it, if one is interested. But people, you know, as Billy Bennett, almost a gentleman on the music hall, said once, there is one thing he likes to see in the press, and that's a good feed of fish and chips. Because in those days, fish and chips, newspapers were used to wrap fish and chips before they started more offset printing where the type came up on the chips.
We were poisoning half the population doing it that way, apparently. But actually, in the PR sector, it was always said that today's headline is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. Melissa, how about the American press? Did you ever feed fish and chips into newspapers?
No, I can't say I have. I mean, most of the news these days, certainly with young people, is online. You know, the days of print are, you know, certainly numbered. You can get Reuters.com, you can get APnews.com, and you don't need a subscription. Some of the newspapers, yes, you need subscriptions too. But I just wanted to just get back to the discussion about leaders and how they like to frame our press, especially here in the US. And when we have a president, if he doesn't like the press or he doesn't like the news, will shout out fake news, fake news, fake news. So what it does is it gives us, you know, it lessens our trust in the media, which is, it's very dangerous. So like Suzanne was saying, we could end up with a situation where we don't have freedom of press and everything is disseminated through the government. And how accurate can that be if our president has been caught in numerous misleading statements and just lies? So I think it's really important that the media call them out for the sake of the public. When I was a journalist, that's what I did. I would ask the tough questions of the leaders, and I will say the former governor of New York, Mario M. Cuomo, did not want me in news conferences because I would ask difficult questions that wouldn't make him look very good. So I promptly told him I would write about the fact that you would not let me into a news conference. Because
they threw you off the bridge because of that, didn't they?
Yes, yes, I know. I do walk the bridge path.
Don't forget,
Paul, can I ask you, one of the things that I was speaking to an eminent journalist in London the other day, a good friend, and his brother has just ceased having a senior editorial post with the Sun, actually. But he says now journalists just take stuff off the media, off the internet. They don't check it. There are no three different sources. They just reprint it. Now, do you feel that that sort of thing is happening? I'll come back to you, Stephen. I can see that you want a word, but I'll give the others a chance first. Did you hear me, Paul?
So you're breaking up a lot, but I think Minister and Annie and Suzanne and Stephen have brought some great points up. Well, I probably said something incorrect. What I'm trying to say is that the media is so, well, uncontrolled at the moment. If it makes mistakes, yes, so what? I agree that that they should, quite rightly, as Melissa say, attack governments when necessary and help the man on the street. But one thing I will say, and I'm guilty as anybody, is we have a sometimes very sleepy population worldwide. We don't actually want to get involved in fights. Yes, we'll go for marches, etc. When I say fights, I mean fight for the right and fight against injustices. So in a way, the media, if it gets it right, can be our crusader on that point, and then be tough with the governments. But if I'm Murdoch or any leading newspaper or media product guy, my main concern will be, am I selling my products? It's a business after all. So I come back to, if I'm Murdoch, is it business and economy against the right facts and causes, or can I blend them all together? Well, that's not possible. So as long as I get stories that sell, I'm happy.
Okay. Stephen, I have to go to Suzanne and Annie in a minute, but you obviously had something that you wanted to riposte.
Yes, but I'll be brief. Certainly this thing mentioned by Paul, that journalists seem to just copy stuff off the social media, is very true, and has been for some years, of local press who seem to print quite happily anything anyone chooses to send them by way of a press release or anything else. But then when we come to newsmen being refused admission to press conferences, do not forget, it is not only the American president who does this, but Boris Johnson has refused to admit certain BBC correspondents and certain media correspondents, and even the nominally independent Channel 4 News correspondent, from Downing Street press conferences. It seems that the guys who want to be heard just don't let anyone present who will contradict them. So it's all prefabricated stuff, and we shouldn't believe it anyway.
Yeah, I must confess is that's worldwide, having worked with the media in a good many countries, is people, journalists who aren't liked by the establishment are refused entry to press conferences and press briefings. It's a pretty bad scene right throughout the world. But Suzanne, one of the things that Paul said is, do you think that there is a problem between storytelling and factual reporting?
No, I definitely do think there is. But what I will say is that I would just appreciate any and all of it. You know, I think one of the greatest roles of a journalist is to tell a story, and there's always an impression, and there's always sort of their slant on it, because they're human, you know. I mean, that's the expectation of a story. And I also think that fact-based reporting also has an impression to it, and it should. I mean, we're humans, and we're trying to work together and understand each other. We're trying to see how we all fit in it, you know. And I think what Stephen brought up is really important. One of the problems is that we're not trying to listen to any of the other sides, you know, regardless if it's storytelling or regardless if it's fact-based. We're not willing to kind of hear what anyone else has to say. And I think that that's one of the issues that we have right now. I will share that in the United States, when we use our newspaper for food, it's under a clam bake typically. On our picnic tables, we will put newspaper out and then have our clams and our lobster and our, what is it?
Oh, shush.
That's what we use our newspaper for. So we don't use it for fish and chips, but I mean, I think that this is such an important conversation. And I think it's really important to have it between the United States and also Britain, because we're actually somewhat in the same boat. We have people who are running our countries who are just kind of not necessarily listening to really anyone but themselves. And that's always dangerous when you're a leader, because that's not the role of a leader, or at least not a democracy. So.
No.
It is, Keith, if I may say, it is the role of a dictator.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, well, that's another issue. What's a dictatorship and what's not? Annie, you use the internet quite a bit. How do you view the stuff that you read?
I try and get if there's a story that sort of interests me, I will try and get the same story from different sources, see how valid it is. So yeah, never believe one source.
And do you find that it's useful to have looking at the internet for news as opposed to buying a newspaper?
Last time I bought the Financial Times, I never even read it. So I don't know.
I used it.
I mean, clearly the internet, well, it depends on what sites you look at, doesn't it? So you will find umpteen types of sites that will sell from just general news to very important ones. But then again, the important ones you'd have to pay for.
Yes, you can in a moment. Just give Annie a chance, please. Actually, one of the interesting things is the FT was formed by, founded by a man called Horatio Bottomley, who was the biggest con artist that Britain ever had. And he lived about 5 miles down the road.
Yes, so I've heard.
Right, we're running out of time. Before I go back to the others, Suzanne, have you got one last word?
Let's all gang up together and start our own news organization. Oh, we have.
Right on. Annie?
Yes, I agree. We are the best.
Okay, I'm not sure. Was it Paul? Were you asking to have a comment?
No, all it was just added. Everyone's been brilliant tonight, but I think the one thing is the information overload. If I'm a normal person in a household, I'm inundated by so many different medias. In the old days, you had 4 papers to read and maybe 4 television channels. I'm not saying go back to that. But if you've got this information overload, how can the man in the street actually make a cohesive decision? He either doesn't read it, reads a bit of it, or reads a lot of it. Either way, the overload actually, it befuzzles me. It's a good word, that good Dickensian word. So that's one thing that worries me, this overload where, which article do I read? What do I believe? That's got to be a major problem.
Stephen?
I go back to what I said. People read what they want to read. They do not want to hear another point of view than their own.
Yeah.
Melissa?
Yeah, they don't want to hear that they might be wrong. There might be another point of view.
Yeah.
So to Suzanne's point, and to Annie's points, it's a good idea to read as many different kinds of sources as possible. The major sources, the major newspapers, I just think it's important to be informed on all sides.
Yeah.
Well, a very wise man once said to me, if you're asked for advice, don't give it, because the person requesting it really just wants confirmation of something he's already thinking. Thank you very much for the panel. Very interesting discussion tonight. We look forward to having you with us next week. Till then, toodle pip from everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good night.